All right, my English teacher friends. So in this video, I'm going to present my Plato's Play-Doh discussion modality, focusing on 3 contemporary poems. And for this particular Plato's Play-Doh discussion, I'm going to highlight my Connect 4 edition. So over the years, as I've done my work with the National Writing Project and have presented with NCTE and done other various things, this comes up a lot. The idea that the Socratic Seminar, Harkness Discussion, Fishbowl tend to be the 3 exclusive discussion modalities that we have at our disposal to offer our students and to kind of play around with in our classrooms. And as I interact with teachers, and even 21 years in the classroom, all 3 of these, they're good. They have their good elements to it, but they're lacking. There's always something missing with discussions, and I think teachers feel that by and large that there's just things like certain students will monopolize the conversation. So typically, I've seen this in my classes, I'll have 5 or 6 kids that just predominate the discussion, and it ends up being a discussion between 5 or 6 students while the remaining 20 students in the class blend in with the wallpaper and just basically take up space, air, and time, and don't contribute much. Another thing, accountability measures are hard to come upon in the Socratic Seminar, the Harkness, and the Fishbowl. So there's a lot missing. And one of the things that I've done as an educator is, I take a look at the snafus, the pitfalls, and the limitations, and I say, how can I make it better? So I'm hoping that with my Plato's Play-Doh discussion, that you find a modality that combines all the positive attributes of the 3 modalities that we're accustomed to, and takes discussion to a whole other level. So one of the things that I really like about Plato's Play-Doh discussion, and teachers that I've worked with over the years who have implemented this in their classroom also report that they like this. The elements of competition and collaboration really adds a whole interesting twist and dynamic to the discussion modality that is not present or even prevalent in the other discussion modalities. So I like it when students are competing against each other, when they're collaborating, when they're working as teams. It gets the shy, reticent, more taciturn kids to contribute, and I find that it becomes a real active classroom discussion. Now, here's the kicker with the Plato's Play-Doh discussion. A thing that I really like about it is that it teaches students to question the text. As I'll highlight in just a second here, ultimately what I do over the course of the academic year is I model and I give exemplars of how I want students to question the text. So we spend a lot of time, especially in AP Lit, with how to read like a professor. And I teach my students questioning strategies. So I really think that, to be a good multiple choice test taker, and then, to write the essays on the AP Lit exam, you have to read very well. You have to ascertain meaning. So the discussion, I find, actually prepares students to be better multiple choice test takers, because students are making all the keen observations that we need them to make in order to get at the construction of meaning and the authorial intent that all multiple choice questions gauge, and then the 3 FRQs as well. So I'll show you in just a little bit here how I prepare my students to ask the good, juicy, pithy questions of a text that help them with their multiple choice scores. So what I do is this. I have a reader response journal that I give my AP Literature students every week. And the journal is comprised of this. What I want them to do is to question the text. So I give them 5 poems, and for this, Plato's Play-Doh discussion, we're working with just a couple, three contemporary poems that I feel would be something that the College Board would put on the exam for one of the FRQs. And the reader response journal is not me asking questions, it's the student asking the questions. So the journal is just ask the best, pithiest, juiciest questions you could possibly ponder and put them in your journal. So as I get into the actual game, what you're going to see are questions that my students generated from last week's reader response journal for these 3 poems. So the big kicker here is that you got to Bob Ross your instruction. And what I mean by that is my students are not able to do this on day one when they come to me the day after Labor Day. I have to really train them to ask questions like this. So at the time of recording, for full confession, it's in early January. I've had my students since early September, and this is where they're at, kind of at the halfway point of the year with me. So I did a lot of Bob Rossing where I really explicitly got to my canvas and easel and showed them over and over and over again how to ask an engaging question of the text. So in terms of the Connect 4 edition, here's how it works. So I split the class into two teams, clearly, a red team and a yellow team. So my class sizes tend to be anywhere from like 28. For my Regents level classes, my AP classes tend to be around 18. So that seems to be a good balance. Teams of 8, 9 students works really well. I do enforce a speaking quota for this. If a student contributes one answer, they cannot contribute an answer again until everyone on the team has spoken or contributed. This is a really nice mechanism in place to ensure that everybody is contributing. What I do is take the best questions from the reader response journals and I just put them into Canvas slides, which you'll see in just a second. And I'll pose the question, and the first hand that goes up, the very first student hand that goes up, gets a crack at that question. The student who generated the questions is in charge. They're facilitating the discussion. My role is just to play tiebreaker, because you'll see, even though they're just competing with a game of Connect 4, some AP kids are very competitive and they can bicker with each other in a fun way. And I end up just being the tiebreaker. Well, I'll say something like, Katrina's point's more valid. It's more in depth. It looks at it, with greater clarity than what Kenneth said. So I'm going with the yellow team on that one. And then the red team, of course, boos me and hisses and all that stuff. But it's all good fun. So let's take a look at the poems that I used here. In kind of imagining and anticipating what the College Board would throw at students, especially for contemporary poetry, I liked this one. It's called Brushing Teeth with My Sister After the Wake by Jim Daniels. And I tried to choose some poems that typically don't get taught in AP literature. I'm a huge poetry reader. I read poetry more than any other genre, so I'm pretty well versed with contemporary poetry. This is a phenomenal piece. It's definitely AP caliber. My second poem is Talking Among Ourselves by Charlie Smith. You can get these all online. And my third poem is In a Dream My Dead Tio Tells Me He's Happy by V. Ruiz. Like, this one's totally College Board-esque, I think, based on the last few years' trends. So here's how it works. I just cobbled together slides where we ask the questions and we just go through the game. So I'll give you a sense of the questions my students are asking here. So this student says, I spy with my little eye that the title and first line bleed into each other. What's the technical theoretical name for this? And why might the author choose this device? This is a fantastic question, right? Because you got to make that observation. The title and the first line bleed into each other. There's a technical theoretical name for that. I want my students to know that. And then why did the author do this in terms of authorial intent and the construction of meaning? What's the purpose of this? So that's an excellent question, and it's juicy, right? It's a very pithy question for students to grapple and tussle with. Here's another one. This poem is 14 lines long. Therefore, what type of poem is it? Great question again. Most kids don't pick up on the fact that this is a contemporary sonnet, and they don't, intuitively, instinctually count lines, and this student was able to ascertain that this is a sonnet. Sonnets typically have an inversion or turning point. Identify where the thematic and tonal shifts occur. refer directly to the text. And again, students are asking these questions. So if they can ask the question, imagine when it comes time for them to do the multiple choice, they already know the answer because they asked the question, you know? So getting them to ask these really good, meaningful questions of a text bodes super well for their multiple choice test taking ability, but also in terms of authorial intent and construction of meaning. When it comes time to write the big thematic concepts, the main like universal truth or universal theme of a poem, they got it through their questioning techniques. Here's another one. In terms of pregnant diction, the use of word clog stands out. How does this singular word create meaning in the work as a whole? So you can see here, I've taught them all this stuff, right? So they're just basically using my language and what they've taught from September to January. Sandwiching wake between two extended dashes is an interesting syntactical maneuver. What is Daniel's intent in doing this? And again, just make observations and ask questions. That's all this is. That's all Plato's Plato discussion is. As we know, art often imitates life. With this in mind, why is it significant that the sonnet breaks a ton of traditional rules? There's no rhyme scheme, very awkward syntax, etc. All right, great question. So, and it goes on here. So there's more. So for the other poems, I likewise cobbled together a bunch of questions that students put down in their reader response journal. And per poem, I usually just take one kid's journal so that they can facilitate the Plato's Plato discussion. So this student here is Samantha, and she came up with questions like this for the second poem. Smith creates a very interesting simile juxtaposition between the brothers in tracer bullets. Look up the function and purpose of tracer bullets. Given what you find, how does this correlation create meaning in the work as a whole? And again, if you can get your students to do this, they are going to do so well on the multiple choice and on the FRQs for FRQ1 and FRQ2. It all comes down to their questioning. Now, to get them there, and I probably should have said this earlier, back in September, October, even in November, I was the one asking the questions during the Plato's Plato discussion and just training students on how to ask questions of this nature. Here's one more just to give you a fuller sense. Smith suggests that if we had the right kind of glasses, there might appear to be a target they all were aiming at. Figuratively, what is the intended target of all their talking? What are the brothers trying to achieve? Another great question. So we did this for the second poem, and then the third poem, likewise about the TO. Oftentimes students neglect to read titles. Based on this particular title, what sort of things can you anticipate in the poem? I love that question because it's true. When I work with students, I'm like, oh my goodness, of course you didn't, you answered all the multiple choice questions incorrect. You didn't read the title. Like little reminders like that, you have to read titles. Like students need to be reminded of that, believe it or not. A lot of my students often don't look at the title, and the title is everything in this poem. Repetition is very important. I spy with my little eye that like this is repeated twice. What is the intent and how does this create meaning in the work as a whole? And I'll give you one last one here. There's a stark juxtaposition between Tio's life and death. Based on contextual clues, what do we know about his life? Support your answer with the text. Great questions. So for each poem, there's about anywhere from 6 to 8 questions, kind of just like the MC test. And that's how we roll. So that, in a sense, is how you do a Plato's Plato discussion. The Connect 4 edition with 3 very good contemporary poems. So if you got questions or you want to try your hand at this and would like these slides, feel free to send me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. Also note that going forward, all of my professional development offerings will be housed through the National Writing Project. So we teamed up together and we are offering some phenomenal professional development opportunities that are actually very affordable. And we have my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. So we have this cadence where, I don't know, about every, every month we're offering this 5-week course. And so you can check that out on teachinghowtowrite.com. It's a great course. I have a self-paced course. Every month we do a webinar for free. So a whole bunch of stuff going on with national writing projects. So to stay abreast of our comings and goings, check out teachinghowtowrite.com for more information there if you'd like to work together and advance your knowledge of all things ELA. So that's it for now. Hope you are well. Happy teaching and happy writing.